Story time with Stephanie Story.
Hello, welcome to the show. This is Story Time, and I'm Stephanie Story. My guest today is the author of three fabulous novels, three novels that I always recommend, for some of my favorite books to recommend for book clubs. So this is House of Bradbury, Girl Made of Clay, and Second Chance Supper Club. I almost said Second Chance Book Club. It would have been appropriate. Second Chance Supper Club. And we have met a few times at events, book events where we've been speakers together. But this lady and I have never had a chance to sit down and have an in-depth conversation. So I'm really excited she could join me today. Welcome to the show, Nicole Meyer.
Thank you, Stephanie. This is so fun.
Yeah, it's good to be able to connect in some weird fashion during this weird non-connecting moment.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
One of the things that you and I have in common that I've always wanted to talk to you about, I lived in LA and worked in the entertainment industry for like 15 years. You are native Southern California.
Yeah.
And I love Southern California. Your first book, this one, is like Hollywood romp, right? Like the House of Bradbury. It's, Ray Bradbury, for those of you at home, Fahrenheit 451 and screenwriter. And so it's set, her protagonist's life is falling apart. So she moves into Ray Bradbury's house and there's this big, it's a Hollywood, it's fun, but it's soaked in like Hollywood stuff. The thing for me is I love Hollywood because it's dominated by this industry, right? This creative industry. But I know a lot of people really struggle with creativity because of that. You grew up in Southern California. You're a native of Southern California. Was it a nurturing place for you as a writer and a creative, or did it hinder you? How did you experience that?
Gosh, that's such a good question. I think a little of both. Southern California is my happy place. I'm actually here in Palm Desert right now because I miss the palm trees and the sunshine. I just kind of feel it really healing. Mm-hmm. But in terms of creativity, I had to get away. There is a culture of competitiveness, I think, in Southern California. And when you're trying to be brave and put yourself on the page and really get out there with your work, sometimes it's hard if everyone's just uber competitive. So I actually live most of the time in the Pacific Northwest. There's a lot of artists in my town. And I felt like being surrounded by that sort of artist culture was really helpful for me to just be myself and be open and be brave and really start producing the novels that I wanted to do.
You moved to Bend, Oregon, right?
Yes.
And did you write this book when living in Southern California, or did you write it up in Oregon?
Everything I've written in Oregon.
Really? So all the books finally came out once you left the crazy Shark Tank that is Southern California.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, as you said, like it's an homage to Southern California, especially House of Bradbury is so LA. My sister actually lived right around the corner from Ray Bradbury's real life house. So I kept going back and visiting as I was writing the book. But yeah, gosh, there's something about being out of your element that you realize or maybe appreciate parts of your old past that you want to put it back into your work.
So this book, I just feel like it's Hollywood romp. The other two, I don't have Girl Made of Clay up here. But the other two, they're very family dysfunction-esque.
Yeah.
I got a little family dysfunction. Is that coming from a place? Okay, so real fast for people at home who haven't read them, all the book club people who want to get them. Girl Made of Clay, you'll correct me where I'm wrong, but this is just my take. Girl Made of Clay is daughter basically has to go home and take care of dad. So it's all about the dad relationship. And he was a famous sculptor and she goes home. And then this one is really about estranged sisters coming back together.
Yes.
Do you have a lot of family dysfunction, or why are you drawn to it?
That's so funny. Okay, who doesn't have family dysfunction, by the way? I don't, how writers sometimes set out to write a certain genre. I never set out to write about family drama, but somehow that's all I write about. I have a pretty big family. There's 4 siblings in my family. And then our parents passed away a long time ago. And I think that there was a lot of drama before my parents passed, while they were passing, and then after they passed, we sort of came together as different people. So yeah, I mean, I definitely pull on a lot of personal history in all of my books.
Is that cathartic for you in some way? Like, do you heal through it, or is it just you're just drawing on stuff and putting it out? Do you know, is there like a personal therapy in that? I don't know. I don't write I write weird family dysfunction, I guess, but.
Right. You know, when I'm doing it, to be honest with you, I don't realize how much of myself or my life I'm putting on the page. It's not until it comes out and someone will point out to me like, oh, this is so much reflective of your son or your sister or your father. But I think that I kept going. You know, after I wrote The Girl Made of Clay, I started to get the letters from strangers who had written the book and said, you know, maybe now I will try and forgive my father. Maybe now I will try and reach out to my sister who I haven't talked to in so long. Or maybe now's the time to, you know, heal that family wound that I just have refused to face. And then when it started to click, I thought, okay, people are relating, because like I said, so many people have family drama. And people were relating, and people were reconsidering their family relationships after reading a few of my stories. And so that kind of fueled me to say, okay, it's okay to sort of share maybe some of my past dysfunctional history onto the page, because people are able to connect the dots and see how it related to their life.
The Girl Made of Clay, in part inspired by your own taking care of your own dad as he passed.
Yeah.
Is that right? I read or saw that in an interview with you somewhere, and I'm sort of fascinated by that. How old were you when you were taking care of your dad, and how did that play out in your writing?
Right. So my mom actually passed first, and then about 7 years later, my dad came to live with me in Bend. My whole family was in California because he was having a hard time taking care of himself. Mm-hmm. And within a matter of months, he just lost a lot of his faculties. The police found him, I think, wandering at 5 a.m. in the morning in his pajamas. He didn't know where he was or who he was. So I stepped in more than I knew I was going to, and really took care of him until he passed. And I think that that is such a interesting dynamic for anyone who's cared for a loved one, or even just a family member or a friend, because there's this sense of, beyond the caring and beyond the emotional part, there's this sense of duty to make sure someone is being looked after. So my father and I weren't particularly close before that. I mean, we weren't estranged, but we weren't super close. So for me to take care of him was kind of me fulfilling a sense of duty, like someone's got to take care of him because he cannot take care of himself. And I think in The Girl Made of Clay, the father and daughter are estranged in that story. But the daughter has this inner sense of duty, like, well, no one's taking care of him. He's in a hospital. He has nowhere to go. Whether I like it or not, I need to step in.
And in Girl Made of Clay, your dad had in the book, it's based on a famous sculptor. Your dad was not a famous sculptor, but he had a clay studio in the back of your house.
Yes.
Right?
Growing up, yeah.
How did being around the visual arts change your writing?
Gosh, that's such a good question. Nobody really asked me that. I think any kid who grows up with any exposure to the fine arts is going to benefit, whether they become an artist or not. I had no clue that this stuff was seeping into my pores. But yeah, my dad did have an art studio. He just basically did sculpting as a hobby. I think it was therapeutic, like just a stress reliever. But he had a studio on our property, and we would go in there and he would let me have a slab of clay, and I could kind of do what I wanted. And he would sculpt things, you know, quietly on his side of the room. And just being exposed to that ability to have the freedom to create something without having to sell it or be judged about it or show the world. My dad just did it for himself. And I think secretly that instilled a seed in me that one day grew into, you can do this for yourself. You can be creative, whether you share it with the world or not. This is something that I'll always carry with me. Yeah.
So when you write, do you write for yourself? You said earlier that you were moved by people telling you about their own stories.
Yes.
But do you write more for yourself or for your readers? I know it's a mix, but
So
where do you
hard.
fall on that?
So the very first book I ever wrote that got published, I wrote for myself, and I was like, I don't care if 10 people read it. I'm just writing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I sort of am half and half. I write. I mean, I kind of only know how to write what I know, right? I just repeated myself. I write what I know. And if it resonates with people, awesome. But I can't say that I don't sit there sometimes and say, what do people want to be reading right now? Because gosh, I have no clue.
Okay, so sisters. So this book is about estranged sisters. Did any of your sisters, you have sisters, yes, because I know you have siblings.
Yes.
Did any of your sisters take it personally?
They are so funny. So I have 2 sisters and a brother, and my 2 sisters have been paranoid from the get-go. Please don't write about me. I don't want to be in your books. So when my very first novel came out, they were definitely looking for themselves in the book. Mm-hmm. With this third book, I think that they've realized I'm really trying to fictionalize the characters. But yeah, I mean, I'm totally pulling on what my knowledge is of sister drama. I mean, sisters are so funny because we're competitive, but we look out for one another. We fight, but then we are each other's biggest champion. There's a lot of back and forth that goes on, at least with my sisters and I. We all love each other and we're super close, but the dynamic is tricky.
It's an interesting relationship because I usually don't have sisters, but I watch them. I have one older brother. I do not have a sister, but I watch them and I think it's gotta be a look because you're friends, but it's your sibling, but you grew up together, but you want to love each other.
Right. There's a lot of judgment, and it's an interesting, especially as we grow into adults with our siblings or even close friends that feel like siblings, the dynamic is constantly shifting from, okay, this was my friend who's supporting me, to this is someone who's questioning my life decisions, to this is someone who can't hold their tongue about my life decisions. And it's just this ever evolving thing. And so that's what happens in the Second Chance Supper Club, is the 2 sisters kind of go different ways and they need to figure out how to come back to one another.
I feel like that's what's going to be at the end of all of this, where we've all gone away to our own corners in a way, and then we're all going to have to figure out how to come back
to
society and go back to work and go back to seeing each other again.
Right.
You're going to have a whole treasure trove of stuff to write about.
But will we go back to how it was? I think we're going to completely shift the paradigm of relationships. Like we have gotten so much connection and touching base with people every day, whether it's on Zoom or under the same roof. And how will we move out when we are allowed to move out? Do you think it will fundamentally change people's family relationships and friend relationships and the way we look at relationships? I hadn't thought about it. I've thought about how it's going to affect other parts of our lives. Right.
I haven't really thought about how it's going to affect our close relationships. Have you have a perspective on that since you write about this stuff?
I think it will. I mean, honestly, not everyone's the same, but I think it definitely will. People are really close right now. We're going through an experience together, and that automatically ties people together. But I think people will come out of this following through with sort of caring about those around them in a different way. It's like, how many times have we said, oh, I'll call you, we'll get together, and it never happens. And sure, some of that will happen when we have our freedom again, but I really do think people have bonded in a very unique way. And it will keep us connected in a different way when we pick up the phone to call or when we gather for a meal. I think that we're connected now, whether we like it or not.
You brought up gathering over a meal. And that was another thing I wanted to ask you about, because so much of this book is focused on the gathering together over the meal.
Yes.
And I've noticed how important food has become everybody's talking about what they're eating. And why do we connect so much over food? Do you have a sense of what that emotional quality is?
Well, it's funny because when I was doing the research for this book, I was researching secret supper clubs, underground supper clubs, the whole concept of underground dining.
Which, stop and explain what that is. I should have done that. Go ahead.
That's fine. So I actually was introduced to the idea from a film that's actually on Netflix now, but it was at a indie film festival when I saw it. It's called 42 Grams, and it's about a chef in Chicago who basically opened up his living room with his wife, and he cooked these like Michelin star 15-course meals for strangers every night. Of course, his life was like fraught with peril because having strangers in your house and being under high stress is hard. But I was fascinated when I kept doing my research based on that all these underground dining places had something in common. It was strangers at a common table, and they came together for a common purpose to, experience this great food, but they all were friends at the end of the meal because they shared an experience together, right? So it's like a metaphor. It's like they have a common interest, they share an experience, even though they have different belief systems, different faiths, different politics, they all come together. And I saw that when I did my research for different, spots around the country, time and time again, people had the same sort of feedback was, yeah, it's amazing. Like, you don't even know these people, and then you sit down for 3 hours with them and you talk and you eat and you gush over the food. And there's something very therapeutic about breaking bread at a table,
Why is that though? Why do we connect so much over? It's like I think this comes from you. There's a healing power to it, right? Yeah. Why is that? Do you know? Did you find out while writing or researching or?
I think food, if it's good food, is comforting. And people, no matter where they are in their life, are seeking comfort. And if you can do something comforting together, there's something very nurturing to your soul about that. And even, like you said, people are home now with the COVID, stay at home and orders, and they're cooking. How many times have we gone online and seen everyone cooking with their family, or little kids are cooking for the adults? And it's the one thing that's sort of healing. My daughter was stirring something in a pot in the kitchen last week, and she said, this is actually really soothing. She wasn't doing anything. She was just stirring so it wouldn't boil over. But there's something very healing about that. You're making a whole thing to comfort someone else. Does that make sense?
Oh, I love it. I love the idea that it's not only about self-comfort, but it's about giving that comfort outwards to other people you have a relationship with. Is this moment giving you new, different perspective? Are you thinking about writing different things because of this pandemic? Like, is it giving you any different, I don't know. I'm thinking a lot about what I'm going to write because it all changes now. It all seems so different.
I so agree with you, and I'm really struggling with that. I had all these book ideas, for my next book before COVID happened. And now that we're all in this universal shift of thought, I'm not sure what I want to write about. I'm not sure what people want to be reading, to be honest with you, because I'm having a hard time connecting to a lot of books out there. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I was just reading something last night. Oh, I know what it was. I was reading a Philippa Gregory book that I just haven't read. And there was like a 3-sentence mention of a sweat that comes through, the Tudor sweat. Oh. And she only devoted 3 sentences to it. Well, now I'm like, I need like 8 pages of what happened with this disease. You can't just mention it and then pass over it. Right. Then again, I don't know if I really want to read those 8 pages. It's all very confusing.
I so agree with that. But I think people are rediscovering relationships with their friends, with their family members. And I think this is a resurgence of, what does family mean? It doesn't have to be you're related by blood, but what does it mean? What do those connections mean to me? What are the connections that have come from the past? I know a lot of us have heard from people maybe from high school or college that we hadn't heard from in years. So it's like, what do these connections mean? And what have we been yearning for all this time, but we haven't realized it until we got quiet?
I know you're struggling with what you're going to write.
Yeah.
How is the creativity in general going during the quarantine pandemic? Because some people are really struggling and some people are lapping up the time. Where are you falling on this?
I have set all of my writing aside. I had these grand plans. Oh, I've got all this free time. I'm going to write. And I actually was drawn back to my other thing that I love doing, which is teaching kids middle school and high school creative writing. So I've gone back to that. I've been doing that online every week. And that's really fulfilling right now because I'm seeing other kids sort of spread their wings and be creative and share with me like really personal, amazing stories that I don't think they have an outlet to do in the everyday world. And that's another thing is that kids that I know are picking up the guitar or picking up a pen or picking up paint because they're not at school and they're not allowed to do sports in a competitive way, and they're revisiting their artistic urges. So I love kind of helping with that.
Helping to foster that. That's lovely. That's a really good use of the pandemic. I haven't heard that one yet. Reaching out and helping young people find their creativity. Good on, Nicole. Awesome. This has been lovely. I could have talked to you a really long time and picked your brain about people and relationships and food. But now everybody at home is going to be forced to read Second Chance Supper Club to hear more about the secret supper clubs.
That's right. And have some food nearby.
That's right. Don't eat it don't read it hungry. Yeah. Then you'll try to eat the book. Thank you for joining me, Nicole. This was fantastic.
Thank you. I'm so excited about your new release too, and it's just beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been a crazy time to have a new book, but we will just keep doing this and do what we do.
Story time virtually. We've got time and plenty of stories, talking stories in a novel way. Story time with Stephanie Story.